Thank you everyone for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Natalie Rodriguez, and I am with the Forensic Technology Center of Excellence, a program of the National Institute of Justice. Before we get started, I will go over how you can view and interact with today's webinar. The first thing I'll draw your attention to is the chat pod, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen next to the player window. The chat is the best way to communicate any questions you have regarding today's material. All questions will be retained until the Q&A session after the presentation. The chat is also the best way to let our support team know if you are experiencing any technical issues. Simply post a short description of the issues you are having, and our audience support team will assist you. If for some reason you happen to lose the audio or video during the live stream, the first thing you should do is refresh your web browser and then click the play button in the middle of the player window. If this does not work or you experience any other technical issues, please use the chat to notify our support team. You can also contact us with any customer support issues with the FTCOE toll-free number or email address located directly above the player window. We will begin today's webinar shortly, but first, please take a moment to type your location into the chat so we can get an idea of where everyone is joining us from today, as well as confirm that the chat is working properly. For today's webinar, we have Emily Lockhart, a senior forensic chemist at the United States Drug Enforcement Administration Special Testing and Research Laboratory in Dulles, Virginia, and Jason Borey, an assistant director with U.S. Customs and Border Protection at the New York Laboratory, presenting narcotic concealment methods in U.S. Customs and Border Protection and the emergence of counterfeit tablets containing fentanyl in the United States. Without further delay, here's Emily and Jason.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here today. I'd also like to say a quick thank you to the American Academy of Forensic Sciences and the Forensic Technology Center of Excellence for having me today. In recent years, counterfeit tablets containing fentanyl have become a persistent component of the illicit drug market in the United States. As such, today I'll briefly discuss tablet production, tablet markings, and trends associated with tablets that contain fentanyl. The first illicit fentanyl sample, meaning not a pharmaceutical preparation, seized by DEA during the current fentanyl epidemic, was seized in May 2013 in Saylorsburg, Pennsylvania. This sample was a brown compressed powder consisting of 5.2% fentanyl hydrochloride, dipyrone, caffeine, and lidocaine. Currently, approximately 1/4 of the fentanyl samples submitted to DEA laboratories are tablets. Primarily, fentanyl is seen in powder form by DEA laboratories, although we do see fentanyl in liquid and tar forms as well. To date, in calendar year 2022, DEA has seized approximately 6 million fentanyl tablets. At this time, the tableting process primarily occurs in Mexico prior to smuggling into the United States, although there have been some tableting operations seized domestically. Foreign and domestic preparation of these tablets often occurs in austere conditions, leading to inconsistent composition. There are a number of components common to fentanyl tablet formulations. The active ingredient, of course, in this case, is fentanyl. We often see other active ingredients in fentanyl tablets, including acetaminophen, caffeine, and dipyrone, among others. Binders, which facilitate uniformity and adhesion. This includes substances like cellulose and phosphates. Lubricants and glidants, which reduce friction and improve flow. This includes substances like stearates and silicon dioxide. Fillers add bulk. In fentanyl tablets, this often includes various sugars such as lactose and mannitol. And of course, pigments, which in the case of fentanyl tablets is often blue or green in various shades. Now I'll show you a short 2-minute video on how tablet presses work.
Welcome to LFA's video on how a tablet press works. A tablet press is used to press a powder into a solid dosage form. The tableting process can be broken down into 4 parts. The filling stage. A powder mixture is added into the hopper, which flows down into the fill tray, whilst the lower punches are pulled downwards by the fill cam. The powder then falls into the die bores by gravity. On some tablet presses, a force feeder is used, which moves the powder over the top of the die face to fill the die bores more efficiently. Metering. Next, the lower punches will move over the metering cam, sometimes known as a dosage cam or weight adjustment cam. This will move the lower punches upwards to remove excess powder out of the die bore. The amount of excess powder will depend on the weight you've set your tablet press. The excess powder is scraped off the top of the die flat and will stay in the fill tray. The purpose of metering is to set the exact amount of powder to be formed into a tablet, ensuring your tablets are a consistent weight. Compression. The punches now move round to the compression stage. This is where both the upper and lower punches are brought together under high pressure to form a tablet. Both the upper and lower punches move between two compression rollers, which bring them together and compress the powder. Pressure is adjusted by the technician, which will determine your tablet's thickness and hardness. If the punches are brought closer together, the tablet will be harder and thinner. If they're further apart, the tablet will be thicker and softer. Every tablet mix is different, so your tablet press will have to be tuned to your mix. This is a process that should be done in small increments. Ejection. Once your tablet has been formed inside the die, the upper punch is lifted out of the die ball by the upper tracking, whilst the lower punch will go over the ejection cam. The lower punch is raised in the die ball until it's flush with the die. This pushes the tablet out of the die and flush with the die table. The table then rotates and pushes the tablet into a scraper, often known as the takeoff scraper, which will move the formed tablet down the ejection tray into a container or the next stage of the process.
These tablets often bear markings of legitimate pharmaceutical products. I'll provide some examples of the markings we see in fentanyl tablets. Not all of the tablets found to contain fentanyl are blue. You'll notice, however, that most commonly they are pressed to resemble oxycodone tablets from various manufacturers. Our laboratory has procured authentic oxycodone tablets from Mallinckrodt as part of ongoing research, so I wanted to start by showing you what those tablets look like. These tablets contain 30 milligrams of oxycodone hydrochloride. This tablet marking is the most commonly seen imprint in counterfeit tablets found to contain fentanyl. Note the stylized shape of the M and the egg shape of the 0 and the 30. These tablets were seized in Arlington, Virginia, and are marked with M30, which is consistent with Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals' 30 milligram oxycodone tablets. These tablets are two different colors, but were seized commingled. Note that the M is not stylized as in the legitimate product. Also note that the tablet on the left, the 0 and the 30, is more of an upside-down teardrop shape than egg-shaped. The color of these tablets also do not match the legitimate product. These tablets were seized in St. Louis, Missouri, and are also marked with M30. These tablets are 4 different colors with different M markings, but were also seized commingled. Again, note that the M is not stylized as in the legitimate product, and that in the tablet on the top right, the 0 is more of an upside-down teardrop shape than egg-shaped. The green tablets on the bottom were clearly pressed using 2 different tablet punches, as evidenced by the different M's. The color of these tablets, again, do not match the legitimate product. The tablet on the left was seized in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and is marked with A215, which is consistent with Actavis 30 milligram oxycodone tablets. Earlier in the opioid epidemic, this was a common marking. In recent years, DEA has seen this less frequently. The tablet on the right was seized in Atlanta, Georgia, and is marked with V4812, which is consistent with Qualitas Pharmaceuticals 30 milligram oxycodone tablets. As I mentioned, not all of the tablets are a blue or green color. The tablet on the left was seized in Louisville, Kentucky, and is marked with C230, which is consistent with Alvogen Incorporated 10 milligram oxycodone tablets. And the tablet on the right was seized in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and is marked with K56, which is consistent with KVK Technology Incorporated 10 milligram oxycodone tablets. These colors and markings are much less common than the markings we previously discussed. Next up, I'll briefly discuss trends observed in samples analyzed by DEA's fentanyl profiling program. The most recent data available is on samples seized in the first half of calendar year 2021. The average amount of fentanyl is 2.2 milligrams per tablet with a dosage range of 0.01 to 8 milligrams per tablet. 45% of the tablet samples analyzed by the fentanyl profiling program contained at least 2 milligrams of fentanyl. Fentanyl, acetaminophen, dipyrone, and mannitol is the most common formulation observed. The Gupta synthesis route is the most common route identified by the fentanyl profiling program. Currently, we are seeing some additional route markers indicating that alterations are being made to the published synthesis. We are conducting additional research to evaluate these methods. The route cannot be determined when the fentanyl purity is especially low or if there are multiple fentanyl-related compounds present in the sample, such as fentanyl and fluorofentanyl. Displayed here is a general overview of the Gupta synthesis. These substances are the primary precursors and intermediates used for this synthetic scheme. There are some additional chemicals needed to facilitate the reaction that are not listed. As I mentioned earlier, fentanyl, acetaminophen, dipyrone, and mannitol is the most common formulation seen by the fentanyl profiling program. There are a number of other notable adulterants seen in tablets, such as other fentanyl-related compounds, tramadol, and xylazine. Thank you for your attention. My contact information is available at the top right of the slide.
All right. Thank you very much, Emily, for your presentation. Good afternoon. My name is Jason Borey, and I am an Assistant Director with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection New York Laboratory. And the presentation I'm going to give today will cover narcotic concealment methods in U.S. Customs and Border Protection air, land, marine, and cargo environments. So, Customs and Border Protection is a component of the Department of Homeland Security, which was officially created on March 1st, 2002, as a result of the terrorist attacks on September 11th, 2001. With more than 60,000 employees, CBP is one of the world's largest law enforcement organizations. They're charged with keeping terrorists and narcotics out of the U.S. while facilitating lawful international travel and trade. So we have Border Patrol agents who patrol close to 6,000 miles of border, and we have CBP officers who screen passengers and cargo at over 320 airports, seaports, and land border crossings. And to give an idea of some of the seizures that our agency is responsible for, we have some figures from fiscal year 21, which was October 2020 to September 2021. During that 1 year period, CBP was responsible for the seizures of 144,900 kilograms of marijuana, almost 87,000 kilograms of methamphetamine, 44,000 kilograms of cocaine, 5,000 kilograms of fentanyl, and 2,450 kilograms of heroin. So, a little bit more about specifically what the Laboratories and Scientific Services branch does. Our labs have the capability to perform traditional criminal forensic work, such as seized drug analysis, latent print processing and comparisons, digital data extractions, and audio-video restoration. Our seized drug analysis work has quickly become the largest part of the system's workload. Changing drug trends, varying supply routes, and a variety of concealment methods make intercepting narcotics a challenging task. And this presentation will show some of the technology used for detecting concealments, some of the unique concealment methods, and some of the sampling and preparation methods utilized prior to analysis. So a little bit on the equipment that is used in the field for detecting concealments. Typically, the chemists in our system, of which I'm one of them, does not normally use this equipment. We're not normally ones who do the detection of these concealments. The officers and agents are the ones who are usually outfitted with this, and they are the ones who deploy it when they're looking through conveyances and cargoes and things like that. So the type of equipment that is used for looking for concealments is generally called non-intrusive inspection equipment. And almost all NII technology falls into one of three categories. We have gamma ray systems, transmission X-ray systems, or backscatter X-ray systems. Advantages of these systems include allowing officers to thoroughly inspect and scan cargo containers, rail cars, trucks, automobiles, pallets, and packages. It's much faster than manually devanning containers and unpacking pallets, which is historically how customs had to do inspections. And it ensures that no damage is done to the conveyance or its contents. Basically, it's a non-destructive technique. This equipment can be categorized as large scale, small scale, and handheld equipment. Technology can be scaled up or down depending upon what type of containers or conveyance needs to be inspected. And due to the differing strengths and weaknesses of the equipment, multiple pieces of NII are normally used in a layered approach to scan for narcotics. There's no single piece of equipment that is going to catch every kind of concealment or anomaly every single time. So these types of equipment are usually used in combination along with additional pieces of information or technology or tools such as canines or just intel gathering in order to capture or make seizures on a lot of these concealments as well. So a little background on each of the different classes of the NII that are being used at the border. The first group are handheld NII, and these are densitometers that function using a backscatter process. So how this works is the device, a handheld device, emits gamma rays that can penetrate up to 6 inches of steel. Some of the gamma rays are reflected to the detector and are recorded. The reflected gamma rays are inversely proportional to the density of the material. Densities of commonly encountered materials are known and can be compared to suspect areas. So irregular densities throughout a uniform object could be an indication of concealed goods. High density materials like lead will prevent penetration of the gamma rays and basically will make this technology useless and unable to detect anomalies. And due to small source size and limited penetration of the gamma rays, it only works well for materials directly abutting the scanning area. So in more layman's terms on how it works, you pass this device along a surface and it will give you a density reading of that surface based on the type of materials that is there. The idea is if an area is hollowed out underneath the surface, such as a concealed container or a trap compartment or anything like that, you will see basically a change in the density as you move from a consistent solid area of material to basically this hollowed out area that is holding drugs, narcotics, or any other type of contraband in there. When you see this drop or change in density there, it's kind of an indication of, okay, we need to do a little bit more thorough investigation. We might have to take this apart, or we might have to take out the cargo and look closer. So that's basically how the densitometers work. Another group of NII is the small scale NII using backscatter imaging. This instrument is also kind of handheld, slightly larger than the densitometer. The way that this technology works is it emits X-rays, and some are reflected at the detector where they are measured. Low density organic materials like narcotics scatter the X-rays to a much greater degree than high density materials such as metal cargo containers and car doors. The greater the scattering effect of the organic materials allows for a clearer image to be formed. The radiation needed for this type of imaging is low enough that it allows for humans to remain within conveyances that are being screened. So it facilitates more speedy investigation of a conveyance. High density items will not be fully penetrated by the X-rays, leaving it possible that some areas may not be imaged. So very solid metal doors or lead-lined containers and things like that will not allow X-rays to pass through, therefore preventing an image from being formed. But if you're looking basically for, again, concealments that are right below the surface, this is another tool that can actually give a good picture of exactly what you're seeing or what is there, due to what the amount of X-rays that are scattered back from the surface to the detector. You'll see a pretty decent picture of what inside might look like. And the final group of NII are the large-scale NII, and these utilize transmission imaging. So in this, high-energy X-rays are emitted by a radiation source located on one side of the container or vehicle and are transmitted through to the detector on the other side. Dense objects absorb more of the X-rays, and those X-rays that can reach the detector help to create an image of the cargo. The higher energy X-rays used means that conveyances cannot be occupied during scanning, so people do have to get out and clear the area. And sometimes it can be hard to differentiate which cargo is closest to the X-ray generator and which is closest to the detector. So it may be, even after getting a picture, you might still need to do a more in-depth examination to find exactly what's going on. So two of the photos here give pretty good representations of what the transmission image looks like. So one thing that you can see is here is when you do the transmission, you have a very solid image here, basically not many details, indicating that not many X-rays were able to penetrate here. But how up here towards the front of the container and the front of the vehicle, you can see it lightens up significantly, and there are more discrete packages, rectangular objects or boxes. So this is basically a tanker truck. So usually the contents are going to be liquid or solid and very, very uniform throughout. This is obviously an anomaly in here and would be a red flag for officers or agents to do a further investigation. And in this case, it turns out that there were 2,432 pounds of marijuana located in this area. Similar image down here, basically. Seeing this, a big jumbled black mask. If you're typically dealing with a cargo container, which is what this is, you can see how regularly shaped it is, basically cubic in shape. You would expect boxes and things to be pretty much well organized and lined up here. However, something like this, where everything is a jumbled mess, kind of would give you an indication, yeah, maybe we need to look further and see what actually is going on in here or what is packaged inside. And in this case, it ended up that there was 6,000 pounds of marijuana located in this container. So those are examples of the different types of NII employed by agents and officers out in the field. Now I'm going to go into some background on large-scale concealment. So large shipments can be concealed in vehicles, cargo containers, and shipments of consumer goods. Many of them involve the use of intricate hidden compartments or empty spaces in assembled products. Car doors, bumpers, tires, cargo containers, floors, and gas tanks are just a few of the observed concealment methods. Fortunately, the NII equipment utilized can pick up anomalies in conveyances, containers, or goods. And in combination with canines and officer experience, it usually allows for a very good chance of discovering concealments in conveyances and cargo containers. So now on to some examples of concealments. So the first one we have here is a concealment within a vehicle trailer bed. So in this one, this was a shipment of flooring tiles. And when it was being investigated, NII, so in this case, it was most likely transmission X-rays, revealed anomalies in the floor of the trailer. So the floor of a trailer here, when you were looking at it, you would expect it to either be solid and consistent all the way through, or you would expect it to be maybe hollow if there was actually a space there. However, in this case, there was actually distinct packets looking down here, which is not something you would expect to see in a floor or solid floor or anything like that. So it warranted further investigation. They also had a canine they brought with it, and the canine alerted on the trailer, indicating the possible presence of narcotics. So at that point, what they decided to do was that they took out the tools that they had and pretty much pried it open and pulled back the metal flooring, and concealed within the bed of the trailer was 78 kilograms of cocaine and approximately 57 kilograms of heroin. So that was one example of a vehicle trailer bed. Then we have this one. This was a concealment within bulk cargo. So this was many, many, many boxes of what was considered or what was claimed to be rose water. In this case, none of the NII technology is really going to be helpful because it turns out in this case, there were narcotics dissolved in the actual water here. So any NII wasn't really going to be helpful. Canines were not going to be helpful either. The main thing here was basically past intelligence of the importer who was bringing things into the country. If they have a previous record or have a flag for smuggling in narcotics in the past, these types of shipments are normally flagged and tested automatically. So in this case, there was 165 kilograms of liquid ketamine, basically dissolved throughout all of these containers. And again, yeah, this was labeled as rose water. This is another cargo type one. In this case, these are fire extinguishers. And as you can see here, they were cut open at some point, and inside was a brown resinous material, along with some white material as well. It turned out this was 6.3 kilograms of heroin inside of a fire extinguisher. There's that brown tar-like substance within. And the giveaway in this case was that the extinguishers felt very heavy, but the gauges on them indicated that the tanks were empty. So that indicated to the officers that these were most likely tampered with. And if they were tampered with, chances are that it could have been a concealment, and they were correct. So additionally, the brown substance inside had a very strong vinegar smell, again, which was a tip-off to the fact that the contents were actually heroin. This one was actually a passenger concealment. So these were 2 bottles of Bailey's, and they were being brought in by a passenger on a bus coming across a land border. So the passenger was on a commercial bus and was referred for secondary inspection. Normally, any kind of secondary would be basically inconsistencies in their stories, nervousness, odd details about them, habits, nervousness, things like that would usually be grounds for doing a secondary inspection. So when they were looking through his baggage, they found 2 bottles of liquid labeled as Bailey's in his luggage. Upon inspection, the bottles were found to be full, but the seal was broken on both of those bottles. Again, this pointed to possible tampering, so it was inspected a little further. The liquid inside was not consistent with Bailey's, so Bailey's could be described as sweet smelling and having the smell of ethanol. This definitely was not that. So there was definitely something else in there. And upon testing, it was found that there were 3.4 kilograms of liquid heroin identified inside these bottles. So other means of concealment. All of those other ones were more large scale, and those were related to mainly what the officers and agents did in the field. The next set that I'm going to talk about are actually samples that we encountered in the laboratory ourselves, and these are more small scale concealments. NII equipment works really well at detecting the large quantities of narcotics hidden in conveyance or cargo, but they're typically not able to be used for these smaller concealments. So in this case, what we're looking at is mislabeling and concealment in much smaller innocuous items as a way of smuggling narcotics through inspection. So if the NII equipment is not as effective, how do we go about detecting these narcotics? So in a lot of cases, officer and analyst experience plays a very large part in how these concealed shipments are found. And as a last resort, the laboratory will sometimes just perform testing of suspected narcotics. Sometimes basically the officers or agents will drop off samples and say, we think there's something here. Can you take a look at it? And this will sometimes will result in us getting kind of common day consumer goods like shampoos, creams, cleaning products, and perfumes and colognes that they suspect of being used for concealment. In many cases, they don't necessarily have anything, but occasionally we do find them. And those are definitely the odd cases, but they're also the most interesting ones. And those are some of the examples I'm going to go into now. So the first one I have is concealment as a chemical. This one was claimed as being a wheel cleaner, an industrial cleaner. Basically, these were just bottles of clear liquid for cleaning wheels and fingernails and things like that. One of the common things, and this was more analyst experience, is that GBL has had a tendency to be discovered in shipments like this of consumer goods that are claimed to be cleaning agents and industrial cleaners and things like that. So past experience indicated, okay, there's a good chance that this could be GBL as well. So the liquid inside in this case actually was GBL, pure GBL. It was not cut or anything like that. We didn't need to do any sample preparation for this. Basically, we placed a drop of it on FTIR, and basically GBL was identified immediately. For GC mass spec analysis to confirm it, we mixed the sample with methylene chloride, filtered and analyzed, and it gave a very nice spectrum for GBL. And that was pretty much all the information we needed. One other point, and this this was probably the main tipping point of why this was forwarded, is when packages are imported into the country, there's normally a declaration sticker that's attached to packages. And on there, basically the importer is asked to put down what it is. A lot of times they'll use deception and put things down like candy or paper or documents or things like that. In this case, whoever imported it actually wrote GBL on the declaration, which was a major tip-off for the officer to send it for further analysis. The next example we have here is a dress, believe it or not. So this was a large dress, and inside the hems of this dress were long strips of a brown material. So as you can see here circled on the picture, you can see some of where the long thin strips were sticking out of the dress. So anywhere there was a strip or a hem on here, there were these strips of taped up brown powder inside of it. So upon going through the entire dress, this is what was taken out of it. A number of long, thin strips of brown material in here. So these heat-sealed strips of brown powder were consigned within the lining of the dress. The total weight of the powder there was a second dress as well. Total weight was 354 grams. We only did GCMS analysis for this due to the likelihood that a mixture was present. And when we received our results, we found that the powder contained caffeine, dextromethorphan, and heroin. So another concealment. This was a decorative house / dollhouse, believe it or not. It looks like it was handmade, and it was flagged for further inspection, mainly due to the presence of a white residue on the base and back, which you will see in this photo. So you can see this white residue all over the place here. It is definitely suspicious, and one of the main reasons it was referred for further analysis. So in this case, what happened was the white crystalline residue was all over here. What was found was that inside this base of the house here, it was hollowed out, and there was a heat-sealed bag of white powder inside the base. What happened was that the bag of powder had a hole in it that resulted when whoever created this and was importing it or bringing it into the country drilled a hole into the base through the bag in order to run an electrical cord that was going to be placed in the house to actually add a light to the house to make it even more authentic. So inadvertently, they basically drilled a hole through it. In the process of transporting it, it was obviously exposed to moisture. So the white solid that leaked out of the plastic bag went into solution, eventually dried, recrystallized, and was everywhere. We ran GC mass spec analysis when we had it here in the lab, and it confirmed the presence of cocaine and presumptively identified levamisole as a cutting agent. This one was a concealment in computer parts. These were what looks like heat sinks used in computers to basically absorb heat that was generated by the computer. The main tip-off here was the poor quality of construction of these. If you've ever seen a real heat sink in a computer, the quality of it is much better than this. You could see the inconsistent formation of the metal here, the very different shapes. It's really, really poor quality good here. So as a result, it was referred for further analysis. So when we received it, what we found was that the poor quality resulted in the officer sending everything here for follow-up. And the base of each heat sink was hollowed out. It was sealed, but they were hollowed. And inside the base of each one was an off-white powder. And after performing analysis, a total of 430 grams of cocaine was identified using GC mass spec. So the next product we have here is a bottle of what looked like Clorox cleaning product. What the smuggler did in this case was they basically disassembled the bottle and cut off the top, cut off the bottom, and actually had a hidden compartment in the middle concealed by the label. So the bottom portion of the bottle was false bottom and it had a small amount of liquid in it still. The top portion had a blue powder that did not contain any controlled substances, but this middle hidden section had two heat sealed packages with white substance in there underneath a bunch of tissues, and that was discovered to be cocaine after we performed GC mass spec analysis. And finally, we have concealment of skin cream. So basically, of all of the concealment methods and all of the submissions that are sent here, the suspicion that drugs are being concealed in skin cream or shampoo or things like that is probably one of the largest ones we have within customs. We get more samples like this than you'd probably be surprised to hear. So in this case, though, since I've been working in customs in the past 18 years, there has not been a single submission of these products where controlled substances have been detected. So most of the time, this becomes a running joke amongst analysts that, yep, here's another shampoo and cream substance that basically all of the agents officers think has drugs in it, but nobody in their right mind would actually conceal drugs inside of cream because it's just too messy and hard to extract it out after the fact. However, in this case, the drugs were not in the cream. What happened in this case was agents submitted this case and requested that creams be tested for controlled substances. Analysis revealed no detectable controlled substances within the cream, and the samples were returned. A similar case with creams was then subsequently submitted, and it was discovered that there was a plastic sleeve inside the jar that separated the cream from a heat-sealed package of powder that was basically conformed along the inside wall of the jar. This was very, very ingenious, not something we had ever seen before, but given that, basically we indicated to the officer, okay, well, we did find something in this case, so they resubmitted the original sample, and these plastic sleeves were with basically heat-sealed packages of powder were found in that one as well. So overall, there were a lot of these heat-sealed packages found within all of these containers of skin cream. Each of the 22 jars had one of these packets of powder between the wall of the jar and the plastic sleeve. Cocaine and levamisole were identified by GC mass spec in all 22 samples in this case. And in total, there was 1.5 kilos of powder spread between all of the jars. So again, while it wasn't necessarily inside the cream, in this case, we actually did find our first case where there was actually drugs inside a cream, albeit not in the way that we thought or the way that the officers or agents suspected. And that is it for my presentation. At this point, I'd be happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you very much for your attention.
Alrighty, thank you both for those very informative presentations. Emily and Jason will now answer any audience questions.
Good afternoon. This is Jason Borey. I'm going to be moderating the question and answer session. And first up, I have a question here for me regarding whether or not we use handheld densitometers as a presumptive test only, or are they confirmatory? So the densitometers are mainly used by our officers in the field for their screening purposes, mainly to identify any kind of anomalies that are present in conveyances or in cargo containers. So basically it's there for their presumptive analysis. If they find anything there, anything hidden, they would either seize it and directly send it, or in some cases they have test kits. They could do color test kits in the field and then forward on the sample to our laboratory for confirmatory analysis. So that's basically how the densitometer is being used. Next, we have a question for Emily. So this one asks, are you seizing fentanyl pills that mimic types of prescription drugs taken by students, such as Adderall, Xanax, and MDMA? The recent overdose fatalities at Ohio State were attributed to fake Adderall, which highlights these risks.
We definitely see all different kinds of prescription mimicked tablets. Typically, we only see fentanyl in opioid type tablets. So whether it's oxycodone, hydrocodone, mimic tablets. Occasionally we'll see them in tablets that look like Xanax, but it's much more rare to see it in tablets with markings that indicate that it would contain, that it would be an Adderall type substance.
All right, thank you, Emily. Next up, there is a question regarding whether my laboratory uses GCMS analysis for controlled substances. This is probably mainly due to the example on the GBL, because we did not do any GCMS analysis there. We do use GCMS in most of the other examples that I showed. We definitely did GCMS analysis. The only reason for doing that with GBL is mainly, in that case, it was manifested as GBL. Basically, they told us what it was to begin with, so we knew what kind of analysis we could do to get it quickly and easily analyzed here. Both Raman and FTIR are very easy for us to do and analyze GBL with. So rather than go through the whole process of putting it through the GCMS, it was just easier to just do FTIR and Raman. Next, I think I have another question for Emily. I believe this one is for you. It says, do you have any information on the source of xylazine that we are seeing more commonly in street fentanyl samples?
I can't really comment on where it's coming from, but we definitely see it all across the US in samples where previously it had been more of a regional adulterant, but we definitely are seeing an increase in the geographic areas that are seeing xylazine and fentanyl samples.
All right, and then we have several joint questions for both of us, so we'll start with those. So this one is, if you come across a new drug, are you creating the new chemical fingerprint for the mass spec, or do you know what the process looks like? Emily, I'll feel free to go first.
Okay. So before a forensic drug laboratory can make an identification of a substance, no matter what it is, we generally have to have a reference material for that. So if we're analyzing a sample and the data looks like it may be cocaine, we have to have a sample of cocaine that has been verified, that we also run using all the same techniques, and then we compare the two pieces of data to show that they match. That's how we're making identifications in the laboratory. And if reference material is not available, that definitely complicates the process. So you can do some interpretation of the mass spec data, but generally you're going to want to have some other techniques like NMR or DART, something like that, where you're getting more and more information to help give you an idea of how that molecule is put together. So while we may not have seen it before and we may not have reference material for it, often we can figure out what the substance is using these other techniques and analyzing that mass spec data to do an elucidation of the structure.
And my answer is very similar to Emily's. That's pretty much how we would go about approaching a new chemical as well. Our jurisdictional allowances give our officers the ability to seize things only on presumptives. So sometimes our cases are easier to basically, we just have to match it to a library spectrum or things like that. So a confirmatory is not always needed. So we can get away with sometimes doing it a little bit more simplistic. But when it comes to criminal cases and things that are going to be going to court, we have to go through the exact same process. And if we don't have the reference material, basically it's left to structural elucidation and NMR analysis. And if that fails, then basically we'll mark it off and say, this is a sample that we need to come back to at a later date when we have more information. And then usually 3 months, 4 months down the line, when a company starts making the reference standards, we'll go back and say, yep, this is what we had. So that's kind of how it goes for that. The next question is another joint one. This is going to be a difficult one. How long does it take to analyze a suspected sample? Emily, feel free to go first.
That definitely varies. If it's a really straightforward sample that is 98% methamphetamine, that's kind of a slam dunk. You can do that in a couple of hours and check that off your list. But if you have something more complicated, like an unknown substance where you're going to have to elucidate the structure or wait for reference material to be purchased, that definitely takes a lot longer. Or as Jason alluded, if we get kind of a weird matrix like a cream or even a plant material product like mushrooms, psychedelic mushrooms, all of those take extractions, and sometimes you may not have a very good extraction and you need to develop one if it's a new type of product that you have, or a matrix that you're not used to analyzing. You may have to do a little bit of research and figure out the best way to get that drug out of the matrix. So that can be a much longer process if that's the case. So it definitely varies depending on the sample.
And yeah, my answer is going to be basically the same. It is very varied. Sometimes we get a very small vial containing a couple of grams of powder, and those are easy samples if they're in our libraries and we have reference materials available. Then we have the huge, gigantic cases where it's thousands upon thousands of stacks of glassine envelopes, and inventorying that stuff alone takes a month, maybe, weighing everything, counting out everything, doing it to the fullest degree that we need to. So unfortunately, yeah, there is no real average or no best guess. The easy samples are easy and can be done in a couple of days, and the really big samples, they take months. And yeah, that's why sometimes there is huge backlogs. These cases, they take a lot of time. All right, another joint question. Have we ever had a chemical drugs or powder drugs found in a smoke detector? Emily, how about you?
Personally, I have not. We're not at a border entry or anything here at this lab. So perhaps, our lab in New York or our lab in San Diego or Miami had maybe seen that, but I don't think at our laboratory we've seen that before.
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet either. I've seen drugs packed into the battery compartment of laptops. I've seen drugs in a lot of other areas, but I haven't seen any in smoke detectors yet. But that's not to say that they haven't been there. Drug traffickers are creative, and if anything, and I'm sure that they have probably tried it at one point or another. So, all right. What do we have next? So this question is for me regarding, does my agency use the Thermo Fisher TrueNarc handheld device for Raman spectroscopy? No, we do not use that right now. Honestly, our agency looks at a lot of these and has used a variety of different handheld detectors. We typically don't like using the handheld detectors for our actual casework. If we can avoid it, we typically use that if we're called to go out into the field and test things on site. In the lab, we like to use a benchtop mounted Raman spectrometer for using that. Again, Raman's not one of the most common techniques, but that's how we would normally go about it. Next. So next we have another joint question. So Is the DEA or CBP labs tracking the nitrogenes, e.g. ISO? Emily?
Absolutely. That's definitely kind of the emerging substances right now, with the class control of fentanyl related substances, both here in the United States and in China. We've seen a substantial decrease in the number of fentanyl related substances being seized. And of course, leaving a big hole in the illicit drug market just makes space for something else to fill it. And right now it's looking like the nitazenes are going to be the next thing to kind of overtake that gap in the user population. So we're definitely tracking that, constantly seeing new ones, and just keeping an eye on it to make sure we're prepared with reference materials so that we can identify it in the lab.
And my lab, particularly here in New York, we actually haven't seen many of the nitrazine compounds. But I know that most of our other sister laboratories across the country have been seeing more of them. Usually our Chicago laboratory actually has seen more of them than we have. But it is definitely something that we are tracking. And like Emily said, this is the next thing to be looking at. So it is definitely on our radar here. Then there's a question for me regarding for the GBL confirmation example. They indicated they thought that GBL could convert to GHB in the injection port, and because of that needed to be derivatized. Is that incorrect, or is it because of the method you use? Honestly, since I've had so much success using just FTIR and ramen, and the GBL samples we have gotten are always pure, I always just did the easiest way and just analyzed it using that, and I don't think I've ever actually even put it onto a GC mass spec and tried it. I'm like, I put it onto the ramen and FTIR. I had 2 category A techniques. I'm done. I didn't even worry about that. But I believe you are correct about the conversion. Yes, it does, and that's one of the reasons why to avoid that. But in this case, since we did have FTIR and ramen available, it kind of made the decision for me. I'm going to go with the easy ways. And next is another joint question. Are our labs doing statistical sampling? Emily?
Yes. So we do use hypergeometric sampling here at DEA. We have some different allowances where we can use a different confidence level if we have negative results in our sampling. We can decrease our confidence interval and still report that way without having to continuously sample. So we had to pivot a little bit when the NPS started coming out and we were getting synthetic cannabinoid packets by the thousands that didn't necessarily always have the same substance in all of them. So we kind of had to come up with a new plan on how we were going to handle large exhibits like that when maybe they weren't all going to contain the same substance. So yes, we do use hypergeometric sampling.
Thanks, Emily. I'm going to go next on the joint one because I keep saying the same thing that you say. So I'm going to answer first next time. But I do, our lab here in New York does statistical sampling as well. Basically, we try to keep to the 90% and 95% confidence interval as much as possible. But again, like Emily, there are special situations where you have to deviate. Otherwise, you're going to be working on a single sample forever. So yes, our procedures are pretty identical to how DEA does it. But we do statistical sampling. One of the good things that my agency has is if it's the officers at the border and they're just seizing materials to destroy it, basically they have an allowance that allows them, if it's present in at least one sample from an entire shipment, they can seize the entire thing and destroy it. So basically we can get around subsampling on some of our samples. Anything going for criminal prosecution, no, we're in the same boat as Emily, but for the samples that are just for seize and destroy, one tablet and the presumptive is more than enough. So Okay. There's a lot more questions here than I thought. So, all right, this one is for me. Does my lab use color tests in the laboratory or just FTIR and GCMS? Typically, we do not use color test kits as a starting point. We are fortunate that we're allowed to we have lots and lots of GCMSs available to us, along with NMR, DART, FTIR, and Raman. So we usually start with one of those and go from there. I know not all labs have the ability to do that, but this is one of the cases where we're pretty fortunate to be able to um, basically skip the more introductory tests like the color tests and stuff like that and move right onto the GCMS. A lot of them just do GCMS and run a reference standard and then they're done with it. So it does make things easy that way. The next one is a joint question. Is ISO still prevalent among the nitrazines? So like I promised, I will go first. My lab doesn't see that many nitrazines actually, so I would not have any idea actually. So Emily, on to you.
We do still see it a little bit, but we are seeing movement as various crime labs are more prepared to analyze it and legislatures become more aware of it and start scheduling actions and things like that. We're starting to see a decrease in isotoniazine, but an increase in some of the other nitazine compounds. So just like a traditional NPS market, it's going to ebb and flow with the various scheduling actions that occur both at the state level and at the federal level.
All right, another joint question. This one involved recently became aware that a field test kit for cocaine, the Nick wipe, will test positive on deodorants. Have you seen this in the field? My answer is no, I have not heard of that before. Emily, how about you?
No, I haven't. I'll definitely chat with our field detection guy that when we get off of here. For
yes,
sure.
I'll look into it too and see if anybody has had any experience, but I haven't had anything like that cross me yet. So, all right. Next question is another joint one. Are you sharing signatures of the new substances with Canadian labs and vice versa? Emily?
So that kind of depends on what you mean by signatures. So at our lab, we do profiling of drugs to figure out where they were made or how they were made. There's not a lot of laboratories in the world that do that kind of work, but we do have partnerships, particularly with Australia. They've set up some similar programs so that we're able to share information about how drugs are being made in our respective countries. I don't think that Canada has anything like that, but we do have communication with their border laboratories and Health Canada to discuss different trends and what we're seeing, because they also have a pretty significant opioid crisis going on up there. So we're all kind of in the same boat and helping each other out, especially from the lab side of things.
And my answer is going to be similar. Yeah, we do try to assist pretty much anybody who would ask for assistance and sharing spectra and information when it's available. The degree to it, to which we do it, is very dependent upon the situation and what type of data we're talking about, because some of it is privileged and we do need to keep it here. But if we can basically cut back some of the identifying information and things like that, then it's pretty easy to share with people and make it more publicly available. All right, we are at the 2-minute mark, so I'm going to ask maybe one more closing question for us, and then we will keep the other questions, and I believe we will be able to answer them at a later date offline. So if I didn't get to it, don't worry about it. We'll still be able to provide an answer at some point. So this last question is a joint one. What types of benzodiazepines are most common that we're seeing? Emily?
So I'm assuming this is referring to kind of the newer novel benzodiazepines. Right now, clonazepam is one of the bigger ones that DEA is seeing. We're also still seeing a lot of atizolam. For whatever reason, that one's still kind of hanging around, but those are definitely the two most prevalent that we're seeing, but we are seeing a little bit of a variety.
And that's pretty much my answer too. Atizolam is actually still one of the top ones that we are seeing. And again, alprazolam is always a very popular one that we are seizing, mainly from importations for personal use and abuse. So we consistently still see alprazolam coming in. So those are the ones that we most often see here. So that's all we have time for today. If I couldn't get to your question here and you'd like to have a follow-up, please feel free to reach out to Emily or me and we can respond to you by email. So basically our emails were displayed before, and we're happy to take any kind of questions that you'd like. So there are emails right there. Feel free to write them down and submit them in. And we're happy to answer any kind of questions that are left over and we can't get to. Thank you very much for attending. I hope it was informative, and have a good rest of the day.
Before you leave today's webinar, please participate in our short 5-minute survey. Simply click the checkbox icon directly above the chat to access the audience feedback survey for today's event. Your feedback is critical information that helps us improve our webinars and continue providing the best experience possible. We would greatly appreciate it. Lastly, across the top of the live stream window are links to our social media profiles, including Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. There is also a link to the FTCOE website, the Just Science podcast, and the FTCOE newsletter registration. Like, follow, or subscribe to stay up to date with everything the FTCOE is doing in support of the forensic community. Thank you again for attending, and we hope everyone has a great day.